All right, so here is chapter 27, section 1. Okay, we'll be talking about respiratory and circulatory functions and the respiratory and circulatory system. In section 1, uh, these are the tubes that lead into and out of your lungs. So you have the bronchus, then the bronchies, then the bronchius, and bronchioles. These are so it's one tube that breaks into a smaller tube, that breaks into smaller tubes, breaks into smaller tubes. And the idea is to spread all the air you get throughout your entire lungs. Here would be one lung, here would be the other lung, the two lobes of the lung. I'm sorry, two sides of a lung. Each lung has its lobes. And then you actually get the function of gas exchange by bringing in oxygen and letting out carbon dioxide through this system. Now, when you think of blood vessels, I want you to think of blood vessels being of two types: oxygen rich and oxygen poor. Oxygen rich are the ones that come away from your heart, okay? Because when your heart pumps oxygen to your lungs, and then from there it goes back to the heart to the rest of the body. So I want you to think of oxygen rich blood as being in arteries, because arteries, for the most part, take blood away from the heart. So arteries away. And this term will come up a little later. Oxygen poor blood comes from your muscles and stuff. Your muscles use up and your other cells use up oxygen to get energy from sugar. And then they will take that oxygen poor blood through veins towards your heart. So arteries get once the blood's oxygenated, it goes to arteries. It's oxygen rich. It goes to your body. Your body uses up that oxygen. Carbon dioxide comes back, and it's oxygen poor blood that comes back in veins. So here you have your sinuses, different parts of your respiratory system. Your sinuses, those of you who have ever gotten a sinus infection, which should be everyone, know that when these things get infected, they swell up, they produce a lot of mucus. It's rather uncomfortable. It can give you a fever, mostly because it's very close to your brain, so your body recognizes the threat. And they're almost separate, but they're interconnected with your nose and mouth. So your nose and mouth here are two areas where gas and air, for this matter, can get into your lungs through your trachea, through your windpipe. And then, so your mouth and nose kind of breathe in, they join in the back here. So your nose and mouth is connected. I don't know if you've ever had where you drank milk or something, laughed, and it came out your nose. It's because it went around this little flap in what's called the pharynx and then out your nose. So these things are connected. The epiglottis, this little flap here, stops food from going into your lungs and water and liquids from going into your lungs. It's like a little stopper. As you get older, it does worse. It does a worse and worse job at sealing, so that stuff can get through, and that's why sometimes as you get older, some people choke more and more. At the end of the branching of the windpipe of the trachea and the bronchus and the bronchioles and the branches and branches and branches, you have these sacs called alveoli. This is where gas exchange actually happens. Little sacs, they have blood vessels all over them. They're really, really vascular, so they have lots and lots of blood that flows through. They capture the oxygen from the air. They push the carbon dioxide into the actual gases that are in the lungs. So when you breathe out, all that carbon dioxide comes out, and then new oxygen can come in. And there's millions of alveoli, unless you smoke, and then there's less, or if you have COPD or some other lung disease, where there'll be less and less of that. So why do we breathe, right? What causes us to breathe? When air is inhaled, what's happening is the diaphragm is this muscle, it contracts, and when it contracts, it flattens, and when it flattens, air comes in, and when it comes in, you breathe in. Then when you breathe out, your muscle relaxes. When the muscle relaxes, air is expelled from the lungs. So muscle contracts, air comes in, muscle relaxes, air goes out. And this goes back and forth. If you ever run a lot or do a lot of exercise, you might notice you'll get cramping underneath your rib cage here. That's because this muscle is being overworked and it doesn't like it. So if you ever experience that, just know that muscle, the diaphragm itself, will get stronger, and as it gets stronger, you will hopefully get less and less of that. And this is all due to air pressure that's created when the diaphragm contracts, comes down and flattens, and fills the lungs, and relaxes and pushes air out of the lungs. So here are the parts, right? Again, arteries take blood away from the heart. They move towards, they get smaller and smaller as they get further and further away. They branch and branch and branch until they get to these things called capillaries. Capillaries where a lot of gas exchange happens. There's capillary beds all over your body. And then the capillaries release the oxygen, bring in the carbon dioxide, and then the carbon dioxide gets pushed through the oxygen poor areas of the blood vessels into the veins and then back into the heart. So here are the three major functions of the circulatory system. You got transporting blood and gases, collecting waste, and maintaining body temperature. And that's it for chapter 27, section 1.